problems, all his friends, their problems. He wore it constantly. So what I was picking up on and receiving was, actually it was 42, 44, 45, about 46 years of my father and every single thing he did. Well, maybe that was an example.
Thank you. Yes.
We have a case where her husband had died and she remarried. And now he's coming back and visiting them all the time. So I guess we have something on our hands.
The case is of a couple.
He died.
Oh, he died.
And
She remarried, and he's been coming back again to revisit. So you do a ho'oponopono between. If you're going to do that, why don't we make a case of that in a workshop?
Fine.
That would be nice. No, not now. In a workshop. So there will be, directions will be when you work on an earthbound soul, that you release them to the path of light. So that's a different approach too. Yes?
Would you have, let's say, a 24-year-old girl who is mentally retarded to 4-year age and have had all the seizures for 20 years and very, very difficult to know. Would it help?
The question was for a person who's retarded as how many years now?
She's 24.
24.
And she's mentally retarded to, well, about a 5-year-old child.
Retarded to the age of a 5-year-old child. Could Ho'oponopono help? It should help to some point. However, in the case that you're citing, I strongly feel that it is a karmic problem. And in releasing that, it may help in the next incarnation of that person.
If you find the karmic cause, can't it help release the physical illness in this life?
You could. But in the area of retardation, anything of that, it would be a karmic problem because he might have killed somebody in another life. But the thing is, it's to the betterment of that soul in doing Ho'oponopono. Always. Yes.
I would just like to mention something at that point. I know specifically of a case with a guru who came from Montreal, and he is a tremendous healer. He's the sort of person that when they did Kirlian photography, they found that there was much more energy out of his hand than any other hand that had been taken at that time. He had been asked to heal a man, this was in Africa at one time, and he said from the divine source, from God, he was told not to do it. But he said he disobeyed God and he healed the man. In consequence, he took on the karmic debt and he was blind for 6 months. And I think, I just wanted to mention this at this stage because we can't always take on other people's karmic debts.
The question comes up in this particular case. So in other words, summing it up, do we take on someone else's karmic problem by doing karmic cleansing? I say no. You could never, ever take on a karmic problem because you are helping to resolve. And in helping to resolve, you're working directly with the source. And the source knows what is needed to be resolved and in rearranging in the metabolism, the molecules of his body. So actually we're just beseeching, we're just applying, handing in an application. What is done is left at the mercy of the divine. So I don't think we're infringing in any way, nor are we infringing in a karmic or we are gaining. This reminds me, when I used to, I had a health spa at the Royal Hawaiian, and I used to be one of these very anxious people. When a person is sick, I'm there. When a person needs help, you're there. But then, to my own detriment, I forget about my own personal health. So one of the major things that we need to do is to be sure that you are healthy, you are balanced, you have enough energy to give, and then extend. My cup must be full first. But if my cup is drained, how can I help another person? And of course it is an infringement on the other person, because I'm laying my hang-up onto that person. And this is why I think one of my girls in the back who worked with me went through a lot of rigorous training, and that whenever we worked on a patient, we did a cleansing in ourselves before we touched the patient. We asked the high self and the Amako of the person, allow me to move in, to help you. Guide me as to how best I can treat this person. We do massage, that's true, but however, we do not infringe in the privacy of the other person. And many times, sometimes they get so busy and they handle from without going through this process. You find the drainage. They're so drained. Why? Because they're going from one, they pick up from the other. They haven't extracted that before working on the other. So what we do, we cleanse ourselves. We work on a patient, whether it's a mental treatment or a physical. Then when we get through, we cleanse ourselves up and we cut off all of these things. Then we go back and work on a person. It may take time, but it is worth the time, the effort.
How about the stigmata? The people that have the stigmata, where people are cured through their intercession, and they absorb or they take on the suffering of the Christ. Could you explain that?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know how to answer that.
Oh, all right, okay.
Because I think it depends on the person's will and desire to take on what they want to.
These are supposed to be holy and saintly people. They take on the sufferings of the people that are cured through them.
That's true. Well, probably they do not know the process of Ho'oponopono. If so, they wouldn't have to suffer.
But they think this is a marvelous privilege.
Well, it might be, but it's a sacrifice.
But they want to do it.
They do want to do it. It is their desire to sacrifice themselves.
Is it right?
Well, it's not for me to say if it's right or not. Because otherwise then I'll be judging them. Because if it is, God created us as individuals, and it is our choice. If it is their choice and it's their bag. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Did I understand you to say that the low self, our own low self, knows where we need help, so there is no reason for us to direct the low self to parts of our body?
That's true. The question was, when we talk about our low self, we assume that the low self knows where the portion of the body needs help. It does. Because when we talk about the low self, where do we think the low self is? Some say it's in the heart, it's in the gut, or in the liver. Not true. The low self permeates the whole body. The skin, 3 inches or 2 inches outside of that, the low self is there. Because you feel the heat of a stove, you feel something, and the sensation is felt by the low self. So the low self permeates the body. It's expressed in every cell, in every minute cell of the body, in every follicle of hair. So because it is there, all we need to do is say, we need help because this person has a broken bone. Now let me explain that when I was young, I learned to do the process of broken bones. At the age 4, my mother used to do it too. And it's written out in a book by Rodman, Sorcerers and Kahunas. And anyway, he had written it in a certain fashion. But my mother used to do it too. But the process that we did was, we had herbs that were planted a little separate from the other, because we used that herb by itself. And next patient comes, we use this herb, but we never see our patient, rarely ever. So I would run out in the yard and do our prayers. Now the prayer, as has been brought out in the, some of the other speakers have brought out about ku and hina, which is the negative positive polarity. We must establish a name, a significance, an identity. So identity was ku for the masculine and hina for the female. So that created the action. Without the negative, you have no action. So the process that was given me was through a dream. I was helping my mother with her method. And finally, in a dream, I had Hina, or the goddess of healing, came to me and said, I don't want to use that leftover. So I said, what do you mean? She said, that is someone else's process and it's a leftover. I'd like to give you something of your own. So what is that? He said, water. The media of water. Whether you image it or it's real in a glass of water. So the process that gave me made it easier for me then to go out in the yard, pick the plant, and come back. And my mother was the proxy. And she was Mr. Jones, Mr. Smith, and so forth on down the line. Well, my neighbors would look over and they would see me. There goes those kahunas again. And it used to bother me because their thought forms were so potent that they were like little hooks, fish hooks. And the pain remained for a whole month. And I thought, my God, do I have to go through all this all the time? Someone comes for healing, we have to do this. So I devised a method. So I'd wait until it took that time to go in the back and come back. And I noticed there were some fronds, grass, growing alongside of the edge of the sidewalk. So I grabbed that and I used that as a proxy, as a substitute for the herb way back in the yard to save me from getting all these negative thought forms. So I did that for a year and a half. And finally my mother looked over the window and there she saw me standing. She said, what are you doing? And then I told her, well, I've been doing it for over a year and a half. She said, well, that's sacrilegious. You should never break the rule. I said, well, I couldn't help it. Because I feel, you are Mr. Smith. Are you truly Mr. Smith? You're only a proxy. Why can't I substitute that herb with the grass? Because they're all God's creations. So from then on, I was on my own. So I either had a regular glass of water or imaged it through imaging. Now, what is the process in working? We do the Ho'oponopono first. Cleansed ourselves, do the Ho'oponopono, and did the healing. So the healing processes were done by the subconscious, by your unihipili. It put all the ingredients together. So the process that we ask is that you be returned, as it was been brought up by Dr. Blaisdell, and taken back, and Mr. Ken was taking you back to when you were first born. I do not say take you back to the beginning, because if so, you might have been a cripple at that time, or you might have been blind at that time. We take you back from the time when you were born from your mother's womb. So it's only in this incarnation. We take you back to that all-perfect state as you were born from your mother's womb. And that's what it is. So what it does, it reassembles the molecules of the bones immediately because the direction has been given. And so the nutrients are put together by your low self, by your computer. It does. And while I was young, I noticed that we had done a Mr. Smith over in Switzerland. And we got a letter from someone and discovered, they said that there were two Mr. Smiths in that same hotel. So as I grew old, I pondered over it and wondered, why is it this Mr. Smith got the healing and not the other Mr. Smith? That's a good question. But the reason is because this was Mr. John J. Smith, this was John B. Smith. Plus the fact we forget that when, even if they were identically the same names, John B. Smith, both are the same, living in the same hotel, the thing that we must not lose sight of is, where did we get the information? Now the thing was, the party that gave me the information, the aqua cord was connected to the patient. And the woman went to London. Someone from London wired us. So this aqua cord stretched all the way there, and so the healing went by way of that. And that's how the man got healed. So the aqua cord goes on endlessly. Yes?
Is it necessary to go back that far for this type of healing. Could you not just go back to the time before he broke this bone?
No,
No?
no. It's so much better because at the time of his birth, all of his molecules were assembled, and that's the all-perfect time. So we can begin to rebuild up until now. It can be instantaneous. And it is instantaneous. But when you say it was broke, maybe time to the, if he was to be restored back to the time prior to the break, you may not have the ingredients that you need to build it. Yes.
I know Dorothy spoke to you about her eye, but is that the kind of